Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you a first look and a breakdown of the overall features, design, and build of the brand new Tamron 10-24mm. This is an f3.5 to f4.5. This is a DI2, which means that it is designed for APS-C or crop sensor cameras. It is a VC, or has Tamron's vibration compensation. That's their image stabilization. And then it also has a brand new kind of focus motor called an HLD motor that I'll detail a little bit more about in just a second. So while Tamron already had a 10-24mm lens for APS-C, this is a modern refresh that has all of Tamron's new design language incorporated into it, which results in a much more modern, clean-looking design. Now, on that note, there are some carryovers from their more premium SP line that is here in the design language, somewhat similar to what's happened with Sigma and in their art series. There's a certain level of build, and then their contemporary series, a lot of the overall look, design language is there, just the materials may not be quite as premium. That remains true here with this Tamron lens, in that while it has the overall look of Tamron's new SP line, and inherits some of the quality features, I did notice that the body is made of a polycarbonate or engineered plastics, as opposed to the aluminum or aluminium that is being used in a lot of the overall SP lenses. And so the build quality is on the nice side of commercial grade, and certainly I would say probably nicer than the Canon or Nikon equivalents, but at the same time it's not quite up to the level with a very, very nice build level of Tamron's SP line recent lenses. However, one thing that it does inherit is the overall moisture resistance of the more premium lenses, and that includes the expensive fluorine coating on the front. And so that is a big plus, and so it inherits that. It also, of course, inherits Tamron's vibration compensation, which the previous lens did not have. And so that's certainly another big plus for this lens, in that while you may not look at such a wide-angle lens as being a very important one for having image stabilization, it's surprising how in different situations image stabilization helps. And one of those areas, of course, is in actually capturing video, where Tamron's VC works quite effectively and can make a considerable difference. And on that note, let me just take a moment and highlight one of the kind of, I would say, hidden features for certain shooters out there. It's not so much of what Tamron has designed, but rather a loophole in what Canon has left on new cameras like the 5D Mark IV. Those of you that are familiar with the 5D Mark IV know that it has a 1.7 times crop factor when shooting 4K video. Now, as a problem, the lenses that work often well with a crop factor like that are APS-C lenses, but Canon's own EFS mount APS-C lenses, they don't fit on the 5D Mark IV. However, third-party lenses, like this Tamron, they do fit, and so I've already started doing some 4K video shooting because you apply that 1.7 times crop factor to the 10 millimeters on the wide end of this lens, and you've still got a full frame equivalency of 17 millimeters, which is still nice and wide and makes it a very useful lens with that nice focus motor and image stabilization. Makes it a very nice option for capturing 4K video and getting a wider perspective. And so this may end up on the wish list for, amateur video producers that are often looking at a lens, like the Sigma 18 to 35mm f1.8, obviously for different reasons for that, with the wide aperture and amazing image quality of that lens. But if you need a wider perspective, this becomes a very tempting option because of those reasons I've just detailed. And so kind of a hidden benefit for certain shooters. Going back to the overall lens design itself, as I mentioned, there's a nice fluorine coating on the front, and one advantage that this lens has over its full-frame brother, the Tamron 15-30 f2.8 VC lens, is that the 15 to 30mm has a bulbous front element and it cannot take traditional filters. This lens, that's not an issue here. It can take 77mm filters, a very common filter size, so that's a plus there, of course, as a part of the overall build. And filter threads here on this lens are plastic, but the quality of the plastics feel good, and most lenses do have plastic filter threads. It's just that Tamron's SP line actually has metal filter threads, which is somewhat unusual these days, so just thought I'd highlight that difference. Unlike Canon, Tamron actually does include the lens hood. Canon only includes lens hoods on its L series premium lenses, but Tamron includes a lens hood here, and it's a useful one. It helps protect that front element. Does provide some shading. I'll be shooting a variety of things. I've already been shooting with the lens some, but I'm actually going on a trip to where I'll be doing some architectural shooting, landscape shooting, and maybe have some opportunities to test it out in some different type situations. So overall, of course, this covers a very useful 10 to 24 millimeter focal length, which is, it is the largest of its class. And so if you are a Nikon shooter, that is a 15 to 36 millimeter focal length overall. And if you are a Canon shooter, that is a 16 millimeter to about 38 millimeter focal length overall, depending on the crop factor of your camera. So certainly, obviously, very, very useful. In terms of the overall focus ring, zoom ring, I should say, is it moves nice and smoothly. There's no hang-ups there, nicely damped overall. There is a little bit of a pulse in and out action in that the lens extends just a little tiny bit, about 1/4 of an inch, couple of millimeters out at 10 millimeters, and at about 13 to 15 millimeters, it is fully retracted, and then there is a similar zooming out that takes place at 24 millimeters. And so it's not completely an internally focused, or zooming lens, I should say, and but it's a very, very minor focal length difference that has changed throughout there. Now, when you look at the actual manual focus ring, it's fairly narrow, about 1/2 inch, and it feels, decent for an auto-focusing lens's manual focus ring. One thing I do like is that there is, particularly on the minimum focus distance area, there's a fair amount of resistance there, mechanical resistance, and so some lenses, it's so loose you can just zoom right past that point, or focus right past that point and never feel it. But it's pretty close to a hard stop that's there. It's not quite as pronounced at infinity. You can go past infinity, but there is kind of a limit there to how far you can go. Now, on that note, the lens can focus down to 0.24 meters. That's right under 8 inches, and so has a fairly decent maximum magnification figure. And that is a 1 to 5.3 times magnification. So certainly that is a useful figure. In terms of the overall just kind of weight of the lens itself, both in Canon and Nikon mounts, the weight is the same. It's 440 grams or 15.5 ounces. And so, a moderately weighted lens, still, nice and light enough to bring along, but it also feels like it is well made overall. It has 7 aperture blades, rounded aperture blades. Image stabilization is rated at 4 stops, which is certainly a useful figure for that. The lens overall is 16 elements and 11 groups. One thing I have noted already is that flare resistance is very good. That's another area where it differentiates itself from the 15 to 30. That curved front element on a lens like the 15 to 30 tends to catch side light in particular, I find. If stray light is coming in from the sides, and so that can affect the image. This lens seems to be very, very flare resistant. I can create some very, very minor ghosting effects under kind of torture test, but they're very minimal, and so it's a very good performance in that area. Contrast stays good in that overall. And so overall, there's a lot of interesting things that are a part of the overall lens design here, and I think that it's going to be an attractive option for a number of people. One thing that I do want to highlight that I find interesting is this new focus motor. And this is HLD, which stands for High-Low Torque Modulated Drive Motor. So HLD is a much more attractive option to saying all of that. So it's not quite like Canon's STM or Nano USM in that this does seem to, it has full-time manual override, and it's not a focus by wire. You can actually control the focus, the actual focus ring. You can make something happen by using the focus ring. However, it does seem to have some of the same qualities, and it's a very, very quiet focus motor. And I noted that when shooting video, unless you're making a very major focus distance, it is probably pretty close to being as quiet as STM overall. And so it just kind of makes me wonder why Tamron is capable of developing a focus motor that allows you to have that quiet, smooth video focus while also allowing you to have a more tactile manual focus response. And of course that to me is my least favorite part of Nano USM or STM, is that focus by wire. And so Tamron has managed to avoid that while still having a lot of the same qualities of STM or Nano USM focus. In the field, focus acquisition is fast. However, it's not as fast as Nano USM. Nano USM is just boom, instantaneous. There's no spool up, so to speak. I find with the Tamron HLD motor that it is very, very fast, but there is that split second feel where there's a bit of a pause while momentum is building, and then it acquires focus almost immediately. But there is that split second between pressing the focus button and the time when everything kind of springs into action. And so it's fast enough that it's going to be good for probably every kind of purpose that you're using. And with lenses this wide, there isn't really a lot of stress that's put on the focus systems. Nothing like large aperture prime lenses or telephoto lenses with large apertures. And so, anyway, I think that you're going to find that focus is good, accurate. Tamron's newest generation of lenses over the last couple of years, they've been very, very reliable and are producing some of the very best third-party autofocus that I've yet seen. And so I'm very impressed with what they're able to accomplish there. It's got all of Tamron's new coatings as a part of the overall optical formula. It's a nicely designed lens, and I'll be reporting back to you on how I find the overall image quality to be. I have owned the Canon 10-22mm. It's been some years though, and frankly my recollections are a little bit hazy as to how good it was, and my standard has changed as I've had the opportunity to use a lot of really outstanding modern gear. But I will try to be finding an appropriate comparison point and trying to give you an accurate reporting on how I find the overall image quality to be, when it comes to overall resolution. And I've already started to note the great flare resistance. We'll look at chromatic aberrations, distortion, vignette, all of those things as a part of my final review. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the linkage down below, you can find an image gallery that I've gotten started there that I'll be adding to on an ongoing basis, and some photos of the lens as well as photos taken with the lens. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.